Welcome to you, adventurers and explorers of life's big questions. Goodness, our big question, how can there be peace in the world today, couldn't be more relevant than at this moment. I'm just feeling the news that we heard about the invasion. I feel that in my body. And over the course of this year, we have asked many big questions. We've asked over the course of actually the last 5 years, we've asked 5 big questions. And they all seem relevant. Why is there suffering? Is there life or consciousness after death? Who, what, where is God? What is the relationship between science and religion? What is the purpose of life? And today, of course, we add this most relevant question: how can there be peace in today's world? Thank you to Susie Cole. Susie, it's so good to see you, President of the Interfaith Council of Rossmore. To the Big Questions Committee, Gloria Sunshine, Channing Miller, and Ruth Ahern. Much appreciation for you, Will McGarvey, our Zoom host and Executive Director of the Contra Costa County Interfaith Council. And to Channel 28 for their recording of these sessions, many of which will be shown in Rossmore on Channel 28. There are several realms from which this question could be addressed: social, political, psychological, philosophical, scientific, and spiritual. And over the course of this year, as we listen to our 16 speakers, we may very well hear answers drawn from some of these realms. Today, we welcome representatives of Sufism and Ananda. And after each speaker, there will be time for questions or comments from the audience. We are privileged to begin with John Ishvaradas Abdullah. Mr. Abdullah is a Sufi and has been involved many years in interfaith activities. He is on the advisory board of the Christian Muslim Consortium, the Southern California Parliament of World Religions, the Southcoast Interfaith Council, and Muslims for Progressive Values. John is also the executive director of World Without Borders Interfaith Sufi Ashram, which is based on and draws its inspiration from his book, A Sufi's Ruminations on One World Under God. What a great title. Welcome, Mr. Abdullah. We look forward to what you have to share with us.
Thank you very much for this very good introduction. And like has been said by Will and Sarah and everybody else, things have changed dramatically since you announced the topic of this talk today. And we are at the verge of there are conflicting information, but like somebody just said, NBC has announced that they have already invaded, but that's going to be very sad news if that is true. But what can you do? Because just a few days ago on one of the NPR stations, there was a professor from Oxford University who was supposed to be an expert on Ukraine. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay, very good. He said this is all Western propaganda. There's going to be no invasion from Russia. He's just testing and trying to get some concessions from the Western powers. So we will have to see what happens in the next few days or maybe even hours. So I don't know. And one of the problems with peace is illusory. Has always been that we have never had peace in the world in its real sense. We have always been in conflict, and even in the US right now, there is tremendous conflict among people. And as long as there is conflict, peace is going to be a difficult choice. So I'm one of the things that I wanted to talk about is how much we, when I say we, I mean in the world, all the people in the world, we the people, may want peace, but we the corporations do not want peace, because the corporations are, if you want to start something about how can there be peace in today's world, we'll have to start with the weapons industry. The weapons industry, like Arundhati Roy said, before there used to be wars and people used to invent weapons. Now weapons are created and then we look for excuse for wars. So wars have become an outcome of the weapons industry. And we all know how difficult it is to even talk about gun violence in the US. And gun violence is the weapons industry is in the business. And that's the reason why, Russia and NATO and all those things and all those countries are bent upon testing their weapons, maybe, or testing the wills of the people. So that is a very difficult question. I was just looking at some of the statistics that USA is the greatest seller of weapons in the world. I'm sure everybody knows that. We sell 37% of all the weapons in the world. In the next, number 2 is Russia, which is 20%, almost half. And then the third is, I believe, let me see, I wrote it down over here. France is number 3, 8.2%, and Germany at number 4 is 0.5%. So if we really want to have an effect, how can there be peace in today's world? We will have to start talking to our own government to finding out how we can reduce the weapons industry. If we don't do that, then there is very little hope, because everybody follows the leader, and the leader is, like Martin Luther King said one time, the greatest purveyor of violence in the world. So it is easy to criticize others, and definitely right now, the more aggressive role that is being played by Russia has to be condemned at all costs. But we have started a lot of wars ourselves, and we have started wars very recently. Everybody knows that, so I don't need to repeat it. But that is the situation right now. And we can talk about, the spiritual aspects in all the aspects. So unless we create a peace movement that is as funded as the Pentagon is funded, or as the weapons industry. See, one of the biggest problem is, like Eisenhower had told us before, that the military industrial complex is the most dangerous thing for the world, not only for the US, but for the world. But that power is keep growing bigger and bigger. And there was a movement some time ago that they wanted to establish a peace department. But to establish a peace department, while there is an existing defense department, so-called defense, because it is actually an offense department, is not going to work, because peace department will have to have as much money allocated as Pentagon receives from the government, or all the other defense contractors receive. The biggest contractors in the world are, I believe, number 1 is Lockheed, number 2 is Boeing, number 3 is Northrop, number 4 is Raytheon, number 5 is General Dynamics, and so on. And if you look at it, we can also assume that all of us are beneficiaries of this weapons industry in one way or another, because all these weapons industries also create products that are consumer products that are for the benefit of humanity. And as long as we keep supporting them, they are happy, and we cannot raise a voice against what they're doing in the weapons area. Take a look at the gun lobby and any attempts to make any changes in the guns laws in the USA is almost a failure all the time. We have not been successful in eliminating weapons like even assault rifles in the country. So these are, I think, the main. I think this is how we can there be peace in the today's world. I think if we can take on the weapons industry, then there is hope that there can be peace in the world. Otherwise, we are just going to pray and going to sympathize with the victims, and that's not going to work. So I wanted to say other things, but I think that the time is not such that we can all talk about what our religions talk about it, how peaceful they are, and how we can achieve peace and all those things. But that becomes hollow words in the presence of the enormous task that we have at hand. So I think I will maybe end at this one and listen to all the other voices in this group, what they have to say. Otherwise, I'll be repeating myself from what I have said earlier or what I have written in the book, because my book, I believe, is a if you haven't seen it, this is my book. Sarah gave the title, "A Sufi's Ruminations on One World Under God." I believe this book is a formula for peace, but that is not going to work, because all these scriptures in the world are formulas for peace, and they are not working. So because we have to tackle the big problem of how do we tackle the defense industry or the military industrial, and now it becomes a military financial industrial complex. So that is the biggest challenge that we have. If we, the people, want to succeed in creating peace in the world, I think we will have to deal with that. So,
thank you, John. So you have a lot of time left, of course, but we can use that. We can use that time for the audience to ask you questions, and or to make comments of their own. We've got about 10 minutes before it's time, or 15 minutes before it's time for the next speakers. So audience, why don't you, I guess the best way to do is to raise your hand, and we will try to call on you, or John, if you're comfortable, call on you. So I've got a comment from Joy Danzig to everyone. What's most terrifying is how youngsters are able to take, whoops, I lost the chat. How youngsters are able to take unlocked guns in their household and bring them to school and shoot. Yes.
I think Joy had the hand first.
Well,
so unmute yourself.
Doesn't that sort of go back to individuals, individual homes, what individual parents allow their children to do and to watch? Doesn't it go back to individuals? That's my question. Peace.
I thought Joy had raised the hand. Do you want to unmute yourself and speak?
I didn't raise my hand to speak. I just put in the chat that as you have heard these horrible stories, that parents don't take the responsibility of locking away the weapons that they feel they have to have in their home, and the children get them and go out and shoot people. That was it. Thank you for recognizing me.
Thank you. Thank you. I thought I had Ruth also wanted to say something.
I didn't have my hand up,
Oh,
but
okay. I thought
I am thinking that what you're suggesting is the only solution to peace is a political solution. That's my question. Is that what you're thinking?
Well, I said there are a lot of spiritual solutions, but they have not been working. The spiritual solutions have been here for, I mean, if not thousands of years, at least for a few thousand years. And we all we all read the scriptures and say we need to do this and that to have peace on earth, but we have not been successful. And I'm suggesting that the reason we have not been successful is because we have a monolithic industry of manufacturing weapons that creates war, and they have to find a venue to use the weapons. And that is the Arundhati Roy. I don't know how many of you are familiar with it. That's what she had a thesis, that weapons industry is the main culprit now, because they create weapons so that wars can be fought. And if there is no war going on, then they will create some situations where war can be created. That's what I'm saying. Otherwise, there are a lot of spiritual solutions, but they're not working. The only thing we do all the time is we say, okay, let's pray, and let's pray for the victims. And that's about it, because that's all we can do in praying.
However, if one does believe in the power of prayer, I find myself saying, all I can do is pray. But if millions and millions and millions of people all over the planet are praying, I believe that there is power in that, along with trying to get rid of the weapons. We have to continue to work on a spiritual problem solving agenda. We can't go after the weapons people. Anyway, anybody else, please? This is a conversation. Gloria, you're muted, Gloria.
Yes, thank you, John, so much. And really, I feel 100% like you do. Absolutely. I think it is the only way, and I think that we are stymied. I believe in prayer, and I believe in God, and I believe in brotherly love and goodness and hope and all of that, as so many of all of us do. But the reality of the weapons complex and the military industrial complex and the money in it, that's reality. And right now we're at a crisis, and we've been at crises before. And how to actually deal with it is what's so overwhelming, which puts us back to prayer. And of course we hope, but as we know that it's God loves us, but God is puts us on this earth to, to have free will and to exert the power that he's given us. So I would consider that I would agree with Sarah that it stops with us and starts with us, but we as individuals somehow have to get the ear or the power of politics in there. Thank you.
Marvin, you had your hand up.
Yes, thanks, Sarah. I guess I'll offer an alternative point of view, and that is that the weaponry as tools. We've all heard the analogy. I can take a hammer and I can build a house. I can build a shelter for someone who doesn't have one, and I can take a hammer and knock my neighbor senseless and kill him. It's a tool, and what drives the use of any tool, and I think obviously automatic weaponry is a tool used only for one purpose, and the question is, why are they produced and should they continue to be produced? But I guess the thought I wanted to introduce is, I think it's how we self-conceptualize, how we see ourselves, who we see ourselves to be in relation to our neighbor, that results in the fights and the armed conflicts that are going on around the world. If I primarily identify as Ukrainian or Russian or American or Chinese, rather than as a human being who has spiritual kin in every culture and in every nation, and that we must endeavor to live together as a spiritual human family, if that's how I self-conceptualize, then everything that and that's a spiritual endeavor, and I think the real problem in the world is that way too few human beings conceptualize that way. They primarily conceptualize as identifying with a particular group that has adversarial relations with other groups of human beings. There isn't a large enough vision of self-conception and who we are and what we're part of. And that is a profoundly spiritual problem. So in a sense, it's arraying spiritual conceptions of who we are as humanity to political and nationalist conceptions, which are almost invariably antagonistic. So that's one thought. The other thought is, I think we're faced again around the world with forms of government that allow strong men, and notice they're very rarely women in history, strong men, totalitarian leaders to take control of a society, shape the propaganda of a society, and then have militaristic purposes and wreak havoc on the world community. And the last time we saw that in a big way was with Adolf Hitler. And I think he's more suave in some ways, but I think some of the motivations and tactics of someone like Putin are not far removed. We've seen rumors in the news of him putting together kill lists and imprisonment lists of anyone that opposes him. And that's, of course, how he's maintained his power in Russia. So we have systems of government that are profoundly different than the one we live in. And unless and until the world deals with that issue of how societies organize and whether they get overtaken really by a totalitarian strongman leader, we will continue to have this situation. So I'll just stop there.
Thank you, Marvin. John, do you have a response?
Well, I think I'm not disagreeing with any of these spiritual solutions that are being proposed. In fact, my whole book is about the spirituality. It is to surrender to love. If you surrender to love, there can be no war. There can be no violence. So that is definitely our spiritual belief. And it is, I believe it is not only the Sufi point of view, it is a Christian point of view, it is Judaism's point of view, it is Hindus, Buddhists, and all the religions propose the same thing. That it is spirituality is the most important one. So it is surrendering to love, peace, and freedom that is going to create peace in the world, rather than surrendering to the weapons industry. I mean, that's what I'm saying, that we have such a huge differential between the money for the non-profit organizations, for example. They don't have enough money to propagate what they want to do. And the weapons industry has all the money to make it look like they are the ones who are necessary to maintain peace in the world. Because how many times we have not heard that this war is to end all wars, and this war is going to create peace, and the wars have never created peace. And the weapons industry is, I believe, is the culprit. So that's the reason I am bringing that up. So I agree with you, Marvin, about the spiritual solutions, and with Sarah and everyone else, that there have to be a spiritual awakening, and it has to be individual. The peace within will bring out the peace without and outside of it.
It sounds like we're talking about interpersonal racism versus structural and institutional racism.
that could be, yeah. Yes.
And that there are certain things that we can do for interpersonal peace and peace inside of our own hearts, peace even within our own families and communities. And yet at the same time, when we're thinking about systemic peace, we need to be able to think about all of those systems that keep moving money towards tools of violence. And if we're not addressing that, then we continue to fill our homes with tools of violence that are there when we get angry and are able to be used at any point in this very violent culture.
Absolutely.
Ruth?
If I may, I'd like to read a short sentence from the Baha'i scriptures from the founder of the Baha'i faith. He says, "The well-being of mankind, its peace and security are unattainable unless and until its unity is firmly established." Tells us where we begin and how we solve the problem. Doesn't tell us every step we have to take, but it's a founding principle.
Thank you. Judy, you had your hand up. Unmute yourself. John, did
Okay.
I cut you off? Did you
No.
want to say something, John?
No, I wasn't saying it.
Okay, Judy, go ahead. You're muted, Judy.
Am I unmuted now?
You are.
Okay. Something that Will said, I don't know how to make myself big, but maybe I am to you. I'm just little to me. Just a little itty bitty person there. Will said something that struck a chord with me vis-a-vis Ukraine and Russia, and a hopeful thought that their Eastern Orthodoxy could serve as a conduit between the two peoples. My experience when I was in Ukraine, I was in Kiev and in Yalta for 2 years during the 9/11 period of our history, about 20 years ago. And one of the really the whole experience was so fascinating, and my love for the Ukrainian people is immense, and my fear for them is enormous. But at the time I was there, despite all the indoctrination from the early communists who believed that religion was the opiate of the people, that was their philosophy. They were atheist and they did not allow any religious activities whatsoever. All of the statues and priests and of priests and so forth, everything had to be buried and destroyed. And during the period when I was there, their religion had begun to emerge again, and they were unearthing. They were literally digging up the saints that had been put underneath the ground for many, many years. Well, since the takeover of the communists, I felt a great, having been embedded with them and living within their homes and their communities, I recall a great sense of spirituality and love among the Ukrainian people. And I hope that you're right, Will, that can possibly be some source of harmony and connection. I don't.
And the sad part, Judy, is that there's already been some politicizing of their faith, and that in these two separatist regions that Russia's been trying to take over, the Orthodox Church has been split between those that are still connected to Ukraine and those that are connected to the Russian Patriarch of Russian Orthodox. There's 13 patriarchates in Eastern Orthodoxy, from Coptic to Syriac to Russian and Greek. And there are divisions within them, and sometimes they've been taking sides in the politics of this, which continues to influence the way that we think about these conflicts. And maybe we should be hearing from Lakshmi so that we can have a fuller conversation about how her presentation will influence our conversation
Thank
in
you,
the
Bill.
next portion.
Thank you. I was gonna do that very soon. Let me just introduce Lakshmi with some of her qualifications and experiences. Lakshmi LaPine is an Ananda light bearer and minister. She is one of the co-managers of Ananda Palo Alto, a spiritual community based on the teachings of Paramhansa Yogananda. She also serves as an English teacher at a local high school. What a challenge that is. Dedicated to fostering an academic setting that promotes individuality, inner self-growth, and contemplative philosophies. A decade-long meditator, she is thoughtful and delightfully engaging. She is a thoughtful and delightfully engaging teacher of yogic philosophy and the teachings of self-realization. Thank you, Lakshmi, for being here, and thank you, John, for your sharing.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I feel a little bashful after having to listen to your own introduction, but it's very sweet to be here with all of you today. I just wanted to begin by coming back to the prayer circle that we had at the very beginning of our session when we started, and really the power and the sweetness of that. I've really appreciated the conversation that we've been having, and these dual realities of what do we do on an interpersonal level, and how do we within each one of us work in cooperation with the divine and with that divine inspiration in order to foster peace, not only within ourselves, but in our communities and the world around us. And then the great challenge that we have of being a force or a channel of peace out into the world, and how we begin to bridge that gap. And I have to pick it up from the spiritual thread because I feel so ill-equipped to pick it up from any other thread. In that same sense. And the prayer circle, when we were beginning and just hearing all of these different voices coming together, calling upon God in that same, with that same great power of faith and that same great power of knowing and believing that what we're communicating, the energy that we're putting out into the world, is a force and is a power, and it does have its own strength, no matter how tangible or intangible it may be. And that's where I wanted to begin and come back today to talk about what that looks like for each one of us to become a channel of peace. The teachings of Ananda and of Paramhansa Yogananda are rooted in yogic philosophy and Vedic philosophy, which suggests that each one of us, and I know we would all sitting in this room to some extent believe and know this to be true, that we are all manifestations of the one same God, this one divine creator. And he's manifested this entire play, and every thought, every circumstance, every action isn't outside of the context of that divine gaze that's watching over all of us. And in the yogic teachings, it comes back to how do we work with our own energy in order to help us to truly realize that, and to know that we too can be channels of that same divine power and that same divine energy, or in this case, to be channels of peace in the world. And I thought there were really three places where we begin. The first of those is to understand energy, and to understand that we are energy and we affect one another, which is why that prayer circle is so beautiful, because here we are, a collection of people. I have, besides one or two of you, I met John. He helped us with we did an interfaith course right in 2020 at the very beginning of the pandemic, and he came and spoke to us then. And I know Sunshine from her connection with Ananda, of course, but the rest of you I'm just meeting for the first time today, and yet we could come together and feel the power of what it meant to come together and to pray in this way. And that's energy. That's that reality that what science would tell us is that everything we know in this world, everything in manifested reality, is a vibration of energy. It's just vibrating and collecting at different frequencies, which creates tables and chairs and thoughts and peoples, but it's all underneath that a source of energy. And when we tap into that and recognize that, we begin to understand the power that we have to impact one another. a few years ago, I was watching a documentary. It was created by a man named Tom Shadyac, who used to be a film producer and director. And he did a lot of those sort of silly, mindless comedies that were popular in the 90s. And then he was a bike rider. He was a cyclist, and he got into an accident on the road, and he had a concussion, a very severe concussion. And as a result of that, he suffered from long-term concussion syndrome, and one of the symptoms of that was a deep depression. And so here was this really funny, lighthearted, happy young man who suddenly, after this accident, was suffering from a very severe depression. And so he started out on a journey of trying to understand the essence of joy, the essence of bliss, the essence of connection, to see if he could find a way out of that. And one of the many different experiments that he did in the midst of creating this documentary was he hooked himself up to what was called a magnometer. And on one side, the magnometer was hooked up to his fingers and his head. And on the other side, the sensors were in a bowl of yogurt, which of course has live cultures in it, but we would not consider a bowl of yogurt to be alive in really any way that consciously that we would think about it. And the scientist who was doing the experiment with him said, all right, I want you to think of something happy, something positive, something that opens your heart joyfully. And the yogurt started to respond to that energy. And then he shifted it and he said, now I want you to think of something negative, think of something contractive and difficult, and the yogurt would respond. And so he was having this energetic vibrational relationship with a bowl of yogurt, which is just an example of, I mean, if we can have that kind of impact on a bowl of yogurt, imagine the impact that we have on one another, who are actually conscious and open and receptive in a way, of course, something like yogurt wouldn't be. And so when we begin to recognize on that firsthand that we are energy, then just as we've been talking about, and as I said, I appreciate these dual realities that we're pulling up at the same time, the tangible changes that need to be made in the world in order to help foster peace. And then what do we do as an individual? We can come back to that essence that we have that power to impact peace, to become a channel of peace when we start to live in the world from that peaceful lens, from that gaze of that inner stillness of knowing that joy, that knowing that cooperation, knowing that love are the truest reality, then we begin to impact that vibration out into the world. And of course, this has been proven not just through an example of a bowl of yogurt and one young man, but studies have shown that they've taken different areas, and this comes back to the comment that you were making, Sarah, about the power of millions of people coming together to pray. They've taken areas of high crime in inner cities and taught young people to meditate. And they've actually found that when people come together in a collective area like that, not in one room, but just on their own meditating, that the crime rate in those areas would actually go down. So our energy, the things that we're doing on a day-to-day basis, it's just like Mother Teresa would say, do small things with great love. That has a much more profound impact than we can imagine. And when we begin to collect that light individually, each one of us, and share that out into the world, just as Sarah was saying, suddenly it's 1, then it's 10, then it's 20, then it's millions. There is an impact that can happen with that. And it comes back to the belief and the trust that we are tools. And in that process, that we can be a tool or a channel, in this case, of that same light. And then once we begin to understand that we're energy, the next step is to look at harmony and attunement. What does that actually mean? Here I am a tool and a channel. I have the ability through my vibration, through my energy, to impact change, to actually create vibrational change in the world. So what is it that I want to focus on? Where is it that I want to go? Of course, that comes back to the question of harmony, of cooperation, coming together and saying, we begin to realize that we are not individuals. And again, I feel like I'm just echoing so many of the things that we've already shared today, but we can never hear them too many times to really know them and to begin to believe them, but that we are not individuals. We are actually a part of something that is interconnected and interwoven in ways that we can't even begin to imagine and to understand. And, much like this example of the bowl of yogurt, I had this experience my senior year of college. I took a course, and this was the course that first set me off on an exploration of spirituality in any way. And it was called Compassion. That was the course. And in this course over the semester, we read a number of different exemplars from different religious traditions, Mother Teresa, Nelson Mandela, also Viktor Frankl, and other people who were practicing spiritual principles and who were embodying principles of expansion in their own lives. And then we would do a contemplative practice after that. So we read Mother Teresa's biography, and then we did a Seeing Christ meditation. Begin with someone you love and feel Christ in them. Then serve someone you don't know. Can you feel Christ in them? And ultimately, could you find someone that you're struggling with, that you have conflict or tension with? And can you feel and see Christ in them? Can you serve the divine in them? And so on and so forth with all of these different exemplars. And one of the activities that we did is we had 2 water bottles. I still have a little picture. I can grab it. It's right on my altar here. 2 little Gatorade water bottles filled with rice and water. And in one of those water bottles, we would say, you know, we hate you, you're ugly. And in the other, we would say, we love you, you're beautiful. And you can actually see, I'll just grab it. It'll take 2 seconds. You can actually see that the rice that's in the bottle that we were affirming with love, it just puffs up naturally. But the rice that was in that bottle where we were sending it that negative energy, it's actually starting to self-implode a little bit. It was exploding in on itself. And so this idea of cooperation, of interconnectivity, beginning to understand that we have energy that we can offer out into the world, and we can channel that directionally toward harmony, toward peace, toward love. I remember when I was a little kid, I was raised in the Catholic tradition before I found Ananda. And so I went, as any young, good Catholic girl would do, I went to all of my catechism classes. So I was about 7 or 8 years old, and I remember sitting in catechism class with the priest, and he was talking to us about Mother Mary, and he was talking to us about the Divine Mother and all that she represented. And he said that if we were to close our eyes, if the whole world were to pray to Mother Mary at the same time for peace, that she would gift peace to us on this earth, and wars would stop and famines would stop, and we would be able to help to create that space of harmony and that space of cooperation. And I can remember being a little 7-year-old and just so jazzed about this idea. And I was praying so hard to Mother Mary every night before I would go to bed, and I would just keep praying for peace and always trying to look around and channel that and see who else I could bring in to the game and where we could pray for peace together. And of course, now I'm 34 years old, so I've had some time to think it through and get to the essence of that. But what is the essence of that? What happens when me as a little 7-year-old girl is praying every day to Mother Mary? I'm calling into and I'm tuning into love. I'm tuning into that divine quality which expands our heart naturally, because love is the true reality. Love is the only essence. And that's difficult for us, at least I should say this is what the Vedic and the yogic teachings would tell us, that love is our only reality. And it's difficult to see that when we're looking out at the world and we see all of the conflict, all of the pain, all of the suffering. And so it's not to excuse that or dismiss it, but to recognize and to understand that part of the role that we can play is to come back to our own ability to channel love, to our own ability to tune into, which is, of course, the third quality here. We have realizing we're energy, harmonizing that energy with those qualities that are beyond the self, with the whole world around us. And then ultimately it's expansion. And love is what expands our heart into that place of pure faith. And so it comes back to practicing faith, to be a true channel of inner peace and to be a channel of peace into the world. When we can have faith that God created and manifested this universe, God created this world, and that we are his instruments, that we have that ability to listen in, to accept, and to do what we can to help to bring light to the world, to help to quiet the darkness, so to speak. I was just thinking of a St. Francis quote: all the darkness in the world cannot extinguish the light of a single candle. And that can feel like something that's so small. And it's true when we're standing up against all that we are and the sobering conditions that, it's so each one of us are feeling it, just how poignant it is that we're sitting here right now, today, on this day, talking about peace when we have a visceral example of whatever the opposite of peace would be in our world, whatever word we wanted to use, conflict, tension, power, greed, any of those. But to recognize above it all of that exists in the world, but there is a force so much stronger, which is light, which is peace, which is God. And that light is always drawing us up. And anytime we come back together and choose to come in and focus on the light, to add our energy to the light, first by transforming ourselves. And it was so beautiful. I think it was either Will or Marvin, someone was talking about being able to create peace in our own spaces, in our own homes, in our own families, in our own minds. That's what the yogic teachings begin to tell us. Can you start by recognizing peace in your own life? And that doesn't just mean being kind, but being calm, being accepting, being still, listening for what the divine inspiration and divine intuition is guiding you to do. And then from there, we expand that out. So we begin in our own center. And Swami Kriyananda, who is the founder of Ananda worldwide, he wrote a sweet little book. It's called Secrets to Bringing Peace on Earth. And there are 30 different aphorisms, one for each day of the month, that help you to contemplate how to be a channel of peace. And the very first one says to remember that whatever peace you bring must begin on that little piece of earth where you live. That any peace we want to bring in the world begins right in our own center. And of course, the second one after that is to calm the heart's feelings and feel that inner sense of connectivity, that inner sense of expansion, faith, trust, belief in the divine. And so even when we're standing up and looking out into the world at something that seems incomprehensible to us, that challenge that seems insurmountable to us, to never lose faith and to always come back and to remember that. And so I wanted to end today, if you guys will indulge me, Paramhansa Yogananda, he created a prayer which is called the Peace and Harmony Prayer. And he recommended this prayer anytime we felt that the world needed prayers of peace, which I couldn't think of a better time. Of course, you could say that as we've been talking about almost any single day of existence, we could talk about the need for that. And he also recommended if you're having tension with somebody in your life, whether a coworker or a family member, he said you could also practice this prayer and you could insert, I'll repeat the prayer to you in just a minute, and then we can silently, I'll lead us and we can all silently do it together. You can insert their name into the prayer. And so the prayer itself is very simple. It just says, Lord, fill this world with peace and harmony, peace and harmony. And so we would repeat that 10 times. And again, this is where if you were having tension with someone in your life that you wanted to help bring harmony to, you could say, Lord, fill blank, fill Lakshmi with peace and harmony, peace and harmony. But today we'll practice, Lord, fill this world with peace and harmony, peace and harmony. And we repeat that 10 times and I'll guide us through it. And then 5 times we repeat, Lord, fill me with peace and harmony, peace and harmony. Because again, we have to stand in our own center to be a channel of that force of peace. We have to stand in our own center and feel that peace in ourselves. So let's take a moment. If you feel to close your eyes, please do. Or if you feel to keep your eyes open, of course, that's fine. And I'll guide us through this and we'll end. Lord, fill this world with peace and harmony, peace and harmony. Lord, fill this world with peace and harmony, peace and harmony. Lord, fill this world with peace and harmony, peace and harmony. Lord, fill this world with peace and harmony, peace and harmony. Lord, fill this world with peace and harmony, peace and harmony. Lord, fill this world with peace and harmony, peace and harmony. Lord, fill this world with peace and harmony, peace and harmony. Lord, fill this world with peace and harmony, peace and harmony. Lord, fill this world with peace and harmony, peace and harmony. And now we'll repeat 3 times. Lord, fill me with peace and harmony. Lord, fill me with peace and harmony, peace and harmony. Lord, fill me with peace and harmony, peace and harmony. Lord, fill me with peace and harmony, peace and harmony. And let's just sit for half a minute or so, tuning into the heart center, feeling waves of that peace resonating out, filling each other, and then spreading out across the whole planet. Every area of conflict, every person in suffering, every soul yearning to turn to the light, and feel them uplifted by waves of that peace. Amen. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Lakshmi. We need that. We need that feeling of centering and peace and harmony. It occurred to me after listening to both of our speakers, Lakshmi and John, presenting 2 different ways of bringing peace, that the weapons don't make themselves. There are people that are the head of these corporations. These are persons who have God or the light inside of them. And so that means that they're not isolated. They're not isolated ones from the peace that you're talking about. They're real people that have to do with these corporations that make these weapons. So, we could pray for them. We could find out their names, maybe, and pray for them. Anyway, thank you, Lakshmi. So now is your time, attendees, to share your thoughts and questions for either Lakshmi or John. This is a great discussion, and it's such an important one. Dr. Steve Albert, please go ahead.
Boy, I love this group. This is the first time I've had the opportunity to meet with you, and the love that is here is part of the consciousness that we need in order to change a lot of what we see. What we've gone through in the last few years has caused us to be fearful of doing new things, knowing that, oh, the bad's going to come back in another form. There's so much that we see out in the world that seems to be out of our control. And in a sense, John was very right. There's people that are doing things, corporations that are doing things that they should not if they had our consciousness. If we were the right ones, why aren't they listening to us? And Lakshmi, boy, I think you're a young me, because the energy that you've spoken about, Dr. Emoto's work with water and all the things that he did, you've presented there. Our consciousness sets the daily belief within us that we can make a difference. If I don't believe in peace in me, how can I believe in peace in you? If I don't believe that some way all of the corporations will turn around and respect each other, each person, if I don't believe that, then you're right, it never will happen. Mother Teresa said, I will not join any group that is against war, but I will join every group that is for peace. I need to be for something. And I want to be one of those many, many people, and we are not alone. I know every one of you here has the consciousness to believe that we can have peace. I want to be part of that group that believes and sends out the energy that peace can happen. Because if we don't start it, who's going to do it? And we're not alone. I'm very fortunate to be involved with groups around the world that are doing interfaith work. And there are multi millions of people who want everything that you want. But we have to keep our consciousness at a level and talk to people who are possibly looking in the wrong direction. That's, of course, we're always right? Those that are looking in the wrong direction need to be given some truth. Did you know that your company is building these weapons and people want to use them to kill others? Is that okay with you? What if your child is one of those people that's killed? Thank you for allowing me to say something here. This is a wonderful group, and I can't wait for you to be part of Interfaith Awareness Week that will happen next August. Thank you.
Reverend Albert, could you put that in the chat, when the Interfaith Awareness Week is happening?
I didn't put the dates, but I put in the chat.
Okay, thank you.
A link. There's a
World
link in
Interfaith
there.
Network, and contacted me.
Oh, okay, good.
Thanks,
didn't see
Reverend
that.
Dr. Steve. I'll just mention that this is similar to the conversations we had a couple of weeks ago when we showed We Are All Newtown. And there's a 20-minute film out there that's put out by the new documentary. And they had, PBS had taken the footage for it and decided not to do it 10 or 11 years ago, in sharing the faith story about how people in urban Hartford felt that all of the attention of the multiple gun violence experiences that people continue to experience inside Hartford just went away when all of the media attention went towards Sandy Hook and Newtown. But they were able, the faith leaders of both Hartford, some of whom like Pastor Sam Saylor, who had lost his son just 10 days before Newtown, started to be in contact more and more with the faith leaders in Newtown, and they started seeing how even the victims of suburban gun violence were very much in the same camp as those that were experiencing urban gun violence. And that if they continued to work apart, they weren't going to be able to address it, but they really needed to work together more and more. And I think that's what we're seeing is the intersectionality of the faith community, looking at gun violence and looking at all of this other forms of violence that are in the world, recognizing the intersectionalities and figuring out how do we do the interpersonal work so that we're not a part of the problem, but also how do we do the systemic work to take away the tools of violence from our culture so that they're not so at hand, especially when we're living in times of anger or times when the cycles of violence that we've talked about so often in diffusing hatred and so many of our other programs tend to be there, that put us at risk of creating greater cycles of violence and retribution.
Thank you, Will. This is your time to make comments or ask questions. I know that we all need to take a deep breath, and there's so much going on that it's hard to get a hold of what we want to share or what we want to say. I just kind of feel like going into a meditation myself. Oh, Channing, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I'm just so taken by everything that's been said today. What I was thinking about is the evolution of the human species and what causes evolution: mutation, adaptability, change. And what I'm thinking is that the evolution that needs to happen in this day and age is spiritual. What Will just talked about is an example of that evolution. Collaboration, compassion, empathy. Those are the qualities, spiritual qualities, that need to be advanced. And the more they are advanced, the more that we pray, the more that we count God in real terms, instead of just functional terms like church, the more that we bring that into our being as reality and live from that. To me, that will be the answer, short of, as my father used to say, the only solution to the world's problems is if we're invaded from outer space. Now, he was joking, but he was really talking about a very serious problem. As John mentioned, for decades, for centuries, we've tried all kinds of reasons and ways to have peace, but none has been successful. And so I choose to evolve. I'm not waiting to be invaded from outer space. I want the rest of my life to be devoted to being evolved as a spiritual being on this planet. And as Lakshmi said, I will then send out energy to everyone around me of love. That's my choice.
Thank you, Channing. That is everybody's choice, isn't it? Free will is the most important energy on the planet. We each can choose how to do each day. So yes, Marvin, go ahead.
This is a great conversation. And it's interesting to see sort of it's moving from one center of focus to another. And of course, all those different foci I think are very relevant, but it's moving, as John has articulated, to societal issues like gun manufacturing and weapons of destruction. Of course, nuclear weaponry is the epitome of that. And then at the other end of the spectrum of the conversation, what Lakshmi was sharing about to the extent that each one of us and as collectives, we bring the power of the spiritual reality of God's presence and function in our lives to the forefront and begin to operate from that basis and feel that love and that compassion we have for each other. That's inseparable from the path forward. Absolutely inseparable. We cannot do it without a spiritual focus. But I wanted to put I just put a passage and sort of prefacing a theme that I'm going to try and sort of throw in some focus on for next month as we continue this conversation. And I'll just go ahead and read it. And to me, this represents some of the juxtaposition of the different themes in our conversation. Without God, without religion, scientific secularism can never coordinate its forces, harmonize its divergent and rivalrous interests, races, and nationalisms. This secularistic human society, meaning a society without God motivated and inspired ideals, this secularistic human society, notwithstanding its unparalleled materialistic achievement, is slowly disintegrating. The chief cohesive force resisting this disintegration of antagonism is nationalism. And nationalism is the chief barrier to world peace. So we have this conundrum, we have a puzzle, and it's a very intricate and very complex puzzle, and we're in the middle of it at this stage in the evolution of civilization. And my Baha'i sisters and brothers, will speak. I know, so we stand shoulder to shoulder. The evolution that is absolutely necessary is we have to begin to transcend national self-identities and begin to conceptualize ourselves as a global spiritual entity and family, and begin to form government and societal structures that function on a global level that antidote both the secularistic viewpoint and the nationalistic viewpoint. And the only way to do that is to come from a spiritually based point of view. That's the only higher sovereignty that we can all allude to that transcends our national loyalties and begins to motivate us to behave as a global humanity, managing ourselves as a global society. And we are struggling mightily. We're in the midst of it, trying to make that transition in this adolescent phase of humanity. And I am concerned that we will have times of great trouble. I don't think it's going to happen necessarily peacefully and easily. I hope it does. But humanity often learns, unfortunately, through adversity and through not having any choice, but to have to cooperate for fear of self-annihilation. I hope it doesn't come to that, but looking at the world events and looking at the lack of wisdom and the lack of spiritual motivation of our leaders, with some exceptions, I have to say, I think it's a 50-50 situation. So anyways, I just wanted to throw out some of those themes, and I'll throw out more of that stuff next month.
Thank you. Thank you. Marvin is going to be one of our speakers next month, along with Nazir Ahmad, who represents Islam. So be sure to tune in next month. We're not done yet with this situation here, but just wanted to point out. Thank you, Marvin. So who else would like to make a statement, ask a question? Yes, Reverend Albert.
Marvin, you were right on, absolutely right on. And one fact that I think has to be mentioned is that nothing good that we are experiencing in life, nothing was not preceded by something bad. When we see the disease, we solve the problem and we find a cure. Every invention, everything good that came about was because we didn't have something good in our life before. We recognized the bad. And I think it's a matter of our bringing a consciousness to everyone around us that what we have right now isn't good. So let's get on with something that is.
Yes. Yes, yes. Thank you. I take a deep breath during.
I can say a little bit about the effort of atheists.
Oh, yes. Go ahead, Bill.
It might be a little ironic to some of us that the Baptist Joint Committee has partnered with Freedom from Religion Foundation to do some of the most important work against Christian nationalism in our culture. And it's because both of these groups, one faithful, but started in a tradition that saw the abuses of theocracy in Pilgrim puritanical New England before the rise of even states of Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island, saw the abuses of theocracy as some of those first settlers came to New England. And of course, the folks that are atheists or had rejected the monotheistic God, or some of whom were secular and some of whom were humanist, and some of whom might have slightly different life philosophies, have been recognizing that this dialogue around Christian nationalism hasn't gone away, and that there are Christians on the far right that continue to teach and preach that America has always been a Christian nation and it needs to become one again, rather than recognizing that we made this decision in 1789 to be a secular republic, where there would be freedom of religion for all rather than a state religion. And so, especially because some of these right-wing Christians have been teaching a certain form of Christian theocracy in order to try to bring about one anti-constitutionally, bring that about, which would have to be the overthrow of the United States. Let's just recognize that. They recognize this threat in the Christian right, not only in the January 6th insurrectionists, but in the lead up to that and the application of it. Christians, and Protestants and Catholics were on Capitol Hill during that day, trying to push this theocracy, and they're very much recognizing those forces that are trying to push that form of Christian theocracy here in the United States.
Thank you for that bit of history. That was the Baptist, what was the name of the organization?
The Baptist Joint Committee has created a subcommittee or a program called Christians Against Christian Nationalism, and they put out a report this last week. And Jamar Tisby and others, just amazing scholars, are a part of this multivocal report. So take a look at it. It's also on the Facebook page.
Is that Southern Baptist or American Baptist or both?
I think it's the Baptist Joint Committee is actually Southern Baptist and American Baptist, which is the new name of the Northern Baptist that they took on after the separation of North and South after slavery. And those two denominations never came back together like the Methodists and the Presbyterians and others have. But it's a Baptist Joint Committee. And the program is called Christians Against Christian Nationalism. But the latest report was put out with the Freedom from Religion Foundation, which is doing some important work on, especially even in the courts, trying to protect the religious freedom for atheists and freedom from religion for them. But they also work with a lot of folks in the military, where there's been a lot of folks that have been trying to really take over the military for these Christian nationalist philosophical movements, and they've been protecting a lot of Jews and Muslims and other folks in the military from folks that would that have been trying to pressure folks to convert towards Christianity, as if you have to be Christian to be an American.
Isn't that an interesting confluence, though? Atheists trying to protect the rest of us against Christian nationalism. That's fascinating, Will. Thank you for sharing that. I think we're coming close to the end of our time. It feels like we could continue, and we will. Will, you suggested a song. Are you offering yourself to lead a song as we close?
I am, and some of you may know it. Joy mentioned it in that it's written by Rabbi Menachem Creditor, who used to be the rabbi at Netivot Shalom on University Avenue in Berkeley, who's now in New York, who I did see in the video of We Are All Newtown, and has been doing work nationally on gun violence for some time. So I'll sing the first verse in Hebrew, and then you can sing along in English. And it goes like this. Olam hesed yibaneh, yada-da-da-da-da-da-da. And olam hesed yibaneh, yada-da-da-da-da-da. And olam hesed yibaneh, and olam hesed yibaneh, I will build this world from love. And you must build this love. Then God will build this world from love. Olam Hesed Yivaneh.
Could I make a comment that the word chesed is also means giving of oneself
Ah.
with love?
Yeah,
Like this.
Thank you, Will. Thank you, and Joy. I just wanted to add one more thing at the last, in the end.
Thank you, Will. Thank you, Will. Reverend
Thank you.
Will.
I wanted to say about Gandhi. You know, Gandhi said, people who think religion has nothing to do with politics know nothing about either politics or religion. What he meant was, and he explained that later, that spirituality has to be channeled through politics in order for it to take shape, to change society. That without doing that, you will not be able to make any changes. So that's the reason why I'm also talking about the politics of weaponization in the weapons industry, that unless we channel our spiritual energies into combating these evils, I don't think we will be able to succeed in bringing peace to the world. That's what my
Thank you so much. Joy?
I wanted to comment when, John, when you were speaking about the weapons industry and people wanting to make money out of weapons, what did I think of was when Moses threw down the 10 commandments because they were building the golden calf. And what I also referred to was the industry that makes fossil fuels. And I think about what we're doing to our world. I'm very much involved with Sustainable Rossmore. And the kinds of energy that we're using, it's contributing to all this carbon in the atmosphere and all the things that it's doing.
Absolutely.
So, you know, greed, nobody talked about greed, but it's there.
It's there. Yeah.
My husband made a statue of Moses throwing down the 10 commandments because of the golden calf.
Thank you, Joy. Thank each one of you. Thank you, especially John Abdullah and Lakshmi LaPine. Thank you for your thoughts.
Thank you very much.
Everybody for your sharings, and thank you just for being here. It has been such a rich experience. Tune in next month to hear Marvin Gowron and Nazir Ahmed, Islam, representing Islam. I think this is going to be a fascinating year and one that is very relevant to what's going on today. God bless you and go in peace.
Thank you, Sarah, for all you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Will. Thank you, Will.
Yes.